No matter how you view this life, there are always a spiritual aspect to the ordinary things we view in the physical. This is the story of Amen. Once upon a time, in a bustling village of Umudi, there lived a young lady named Amen. She was 26 years old, and her name was known far and wide, not just because of her extraordinary beauty, but also because of her unmatched skill as a fashion designer. People marveled at the dresses she made. Chiefs, traders, and even queens traveled from distant lands to wear her design. Emmy's workshop was the busiest place in the village. Every day, women came in with colorful fabrics, eager for Emmy to work her magic. Her stitches were precise and her designs unique, and everything she made seems to shine with a special touch. The villagers whispered, "It's as though her hands were blessed by the gods." But while the villagers celebrated Emme's success, there was something mysterious about her. She lived alone in a large house near the edge of the forest. Although she employed several apprentices, no one was allowed to enter her private design room. She worked there alone, often late into the night. Strange whispers and shadows could sometimes be seen through the window, but no one dared to ask questions. One day, a young woman named Ifunanya arrived at Amy's workshop. She was 20 years old, with bright eyes and a curious mind. Ifunanya has always loved sewing and dreamed of becoming as skilled as Amy one day. She had saved money for years to travel to Umundi and become an apprentice. "Ifunanya, welcome," Amy said when they first met. Her voice was calm, but carried a power that made Ifunanya feel both awed and uneasy. "Thank you, ma. I'm honored to learn from you," Ifunanya said, bowing slightly. Emmy's sharp eyes studied her for a moment, then she smiled. "You will work hard and you will learn. But remember, some things are not for everyone. Respect the rules here and you will do well here." "Yes, ma," Ifunanya promised. Ifunanya quickly proved herself to be a fast learner. She watched every stitch Emma made, mimicking her techniques. Soon she was sewing skirts and blouses that amazed customers. But other apprentices admired her. But Ifunanya noticed something strange. No one ever talked about Emma's personal life. "Auntie Amen is so beautiful," Ifunanya once said to Chisom. "Auntie Amen is so beautiful," Ifunanya once said to Chisom, one of the older apprentices. Chisom lowered her voice. "She is more than beautiful. She hadn't aged a day since I started working here 5 years ago." Ifunanya blinked in surprise. "How is it possible?" "No one knows," Chisom whispered. "But don't ask too many questions. Amen doesn't like noisy people." One evening, after the workshop had closed for the day, Ifunanya decided to stay back and clean the sewing machine. As she walked, she heard a faint humming sound coming from the locked room where Emmy worked late at night. The door was slightly ajar, and a soft glow spilled into the walkway. Curiosity tugged at her. Ifunanya moved closer, peeping through the crack in the door. Inside, she saw Emmy sitting in front of a large mirror. But something was strange. The mirror didn't reflect Emmy's face. Instead, it showed swirling red and black shadows, as if something alive was inside it. Ifunanya gasped, and the sound made Emmy whip her head around. Her usual calm face was filled with fury. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I was just cleaning, ma," Ifunanya stammered, stepping back. Emmy's eyes narrowed. "This room is forbidden. Never come near it again, or you will regret it." Ifunanya nodded quickly, fear making her heart race. She ran out of the workshop and didn't look back. That night, Ifunanya lay awake in her small room, her mind filled with questions. What was in that mirror? Why didn't it show Emmy's reflection? And why did Emmy look so angry? But she knew one thing was certain: Emmy was hiding something. The following morning, Ifunanya arrived at the workshop earlier than usual. She tried to focus on her sewing, but her mind kept drifting to the forbidden room and the strange mirror she had seen the night before. She wanted to ask someone about it, but a part of her was afraid. Emmy's anger had been terrifying, and Ifunanya didn't want to lose her place in the workshop. As the day went on, Ifunanya walked silently, but her curiosity grew stronger. Why did Emmy forbid everyone from entering that room? What is in the glowing mirror? And why didn't the mirror reflect Emmy's face? That evening, after everyone had left, Ifnaya decided to stay back again. She's pretending to be cleaning, but she was really watching Emin. As usual, Emin locked herself in the private room. Ifnaya crept closer, pressing her ear to the door. She could hear a faint humming sound again, like the song being sung in a strange, unfamiliar language. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Ifnaya quickly stepped back, her heart pounding. The door opened, and Emin stepped out. Her eyes scanned the workshop, and for a moment they rested on Ifunanya. "You are still here?" Emin asked, her voice sharp. "Yes, I just finished cleaning, ma'am," Ifunanya stammered. Emin glares lingered for a moment before she nodded. "Go home. You have done enough for today." Ifunanya quickly gathered her things and left, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Emin suspected something. The next few days passed uneventfully, but Ifnaya's curiosity didn't fade. She began paying close attention to Emin. She noticed that Emin never looked at her reflection, not even the glass mirrors of the workshop. And no matter how busy or tired she seemed, Emin's face was always flawless. Her skin smooth and her hair shining, her eyes bright. "Ifnaya, focus!" Emin's voice snapped Ifnaya out of her thoughts. "Yes, ma'am," Ifnaya replied, quickly turning her attention back to her work. But her mind was racing. What was something unnatural about Emin's beauty? A few days later, an old woman came to the workshop. She wore a faded wrapper and leaned heavily on a walking stick, but her eyes were sharp and full of wisdom. "I have come to see Emin," the old woman said. "She is busy," Chisom replied. "She doesn't take visitors without an appointment." The old woman smiled faintly. "Tell her Mama Nkechi is here. She will want to see me." Chisom hesitated but eventually went to fetch Emin. When Emin saw the old woman, her face froze. For the first time, Ifunanya saw fear in Emin's eyes. "Mama Nkechi," Emin said, forcing a smile, "what brings you here?" The old woman chuckled softly. "You know why I'm here, Emin. You can't hide from the past forever." Emin's smile flattered. "Please, not here. Come in, please." The two women disappeared into the forbidden room. Ifunaya's heart raced. Who is this old woman, and why did she Who is this old woman and what did she mean by the past? When Emin and Mama Nkechi emerged from the room an hour later, Emin's face looked pale and shaking. Mama Nkechi leaned closer to her and whispered something that Ifunanya couldn't hear. Then the old woman turned and left without another word. As soon as the door closed, Emin turned to the apprentices. "Everyone, go home early today. I need to think." The apprentices exchanged puzzled glances but didn't argue. Ifna hesitated, her curiosity burning. What had Mama Nkechi said to Emin? And why had Emin looked so frightened? Later that night, Ifnaya couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the events of the day in her mind. Finally, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to know the truth. "If I don't find out what is happening, I will never have peace," she whispered to herself. Quietly, she left her room and made her way to the workshop. The village was dark and silent, and the only sound of crickets filled the air. Ifnaya slipped into the workshop and tiptoed toward the forbidden room. The door was unlocked. Taking a deep breath, Ifnaya pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was just as she remembered it. The glowing red box sat on the table, and the large cracked mirror hung on the wall. The air felt heavy, as though the room itself was alive. Ifnaya moved closer to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her. But as she watched, her reflection began to change. Her face melted away, replacing by shadows. A deep echoing voice filled the room. "Why have you come here, child?" the voice asked. Ifnaya stumbled back, her heart pounding. Who are you?" she whispered. The voice chuckled darkly. "I am the keeper of secrets, and you have seen too much." The mirror surface rippled, and the shadow seemed to reach out towards Ifunanya. She screamed and turned to run, but the door slammed shut. "You cannot escape," the voice said. "Leave now and forget what you have seen, or pay the price." Ifnaya grabbed the door handle and pulled with all her strength. The door flew open, and she stumbled out into the hallway. She didn't stop running until she was back to her room, her chest heaving with fear. She didn't sleep that night, but one thing was clear. Emmy was hiding a terrible secret. and Ifnaya was determined to uncover it. The next morning, Ifnaya arrived at the workshop feeling uneasy. Her sleepless night had left her tired, but the fear from her encounter in the forbidden room still gripped her. She couldn't shake the memory of the voice, the shadows, and the strange energy in the mirror. Emma was already in the workshop, her usual calm and graceful self, but Ifnaya noticed something different about her. There was a tension in her movement, as though she was troubled by something. Ifnaya, Emma said suddenly, her voice sharp. Ifnaya froze. Yes, ma. Emma's piercing gaze rested on her for a moment. You look tired. Is everything all right? Yes, ma, Ifnaya lied, lowering her eyes. Emma said nothing more, but watched Ifnaya closely for the rest of the day. That evening, after the apprentices had left, Emma called Ifnaya aside. I want to talk to you, she said, her tone unusually serious. Ifnaya's heart raced. Did Emma know she had entered the forbidden room? Yes, ma, Ifnaya said, trying to keep her voice steady. Emma sat down, gestured for Ifnaya to do the same. For a moment, she said nothing, just studying Ifnaya's face. Then she sighed. You have been here for only a few months now, and I have noticed that you are different from the others, Emma said. Ifnaya wasn't sure how to respond, so she stayed quiet. You are curious, Emma continued. That can be a good thing, but it can also be very dangerous. Ifnaya's hand clenched on her laps. I only want to learn from you, ma, she said cautiously. Emma nodded slowly. I know, but there are some things you should not try to understand. Do you hear me? Yes, ma, Ifnaya said, though her mind was filled with question. That night, as Ifnaya lay on the bed, she thought about Emma's voice. She thought about all she had said. Why did Emma seem so nervous? And what was in that room that she didn't want anyone to know about? Ifnaya's curiosity grew stronger. She knew the voice in the mirror had warned her to stay away, but she couldn't let go of the feeling that there was something important she needed to discover. The next day, Ifnaya noticed something strange. Mama Nkechi, the old woman who had visited the workshop, was back in the village. Ifnaya spotted her near the market, speaking with one of the elders. Gathering her courage, Ifnaya approached her. Mama Nkechi, she said, bowing respectfully. The old woman turned, her sharp eyes resting on Ifnaya. Ah, the young apprentice, she said. What brings you to me? I wanted to ask you about Amen, Ifnaya said hesitantly. You seem to know her well. Mama Nkechi's expression darkened. You should be careful, child. Amen is not what she seems. What do you mean? Ifnaya asked, her heart pounding. The old woman glanced around, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. Then she looked closer and whispered, her beauty and her talent are not natural. She made a deal with something dark, and now she is paying the price. Ifnaya's eyes widened. A deal? Mama Nkechi nodded. Years ago, she was young and desperate. She went to a forest to seek help. She found it, but the price was higher than she expected. What price? Ifnaya asked, her voice barely a whisper. This is for Emen to tell you, Mama Nkechi said. But be careful, child. If you dig too deep, you may find yourself caught in the same trap. Ifnaya returned to the workshop, her mind racing. Mama Nkechi's words confirming her suspicion. Emen's success and beauty were tied to something unnatural. But what exactly has she done? That evening, Ifnaya stayed back at the workshop again. She waited until Emen went into the forbidden room. Then she crept closer, pressing her ear to the door. This time, she heard Emen speaking. Her voice was low and desperate. Please, Emen said, I have done everything you asked. Why are you punishing me? A deep echoing voice responded. The price must be paid, Emen. You cannot escape it. Emen's voice trembled. But I have given you so much. What more do you want? The voice laughed, a chilling sound that made Ifnaya shiver. You know what I want, and you know what will happen if you refuse. Ifnaya's heart pounded. She didn't fully understand what she was hearing, but it was very clear that Emen was in trouble. Suddenly, the door opened, and Emen stepped out. Her eyes widened when she saw Ifnaya standing there again. What are you doing here? Emen demanded, her voice sharp with anger. I was cleaning ma, Ifunanya stammered, stepping back. Emme's eye narrowed. Don't lie to me, she said. You were listening, weren't you? Ifunanya didn't know what to say. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Emme sighed and shook her head. Go home, Ifunanya, and don't come near this room again. Do you hear me? Yes, ma, Ifunanya said, her voice trembling. As Ifunanya walked home that night, her mind was filled with questions. What had Emme done? And what was the price she's paying? Ifunanya knew she should stay away from the forbidden room, but her curiosity was stronger than ever. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the risk. If Naya couldn't stop thinking about what she had overheard, the words spoken by the deep echoing voice haunted her. She tried to focus on her sewing at the workshop, but her mind was restless. What was the price Amy had to pay? And who or what was she speaking to? Amy, on the other hand, was unusually quiet. She avoided meeting Ifunaya's eyes and seemed distracted. Even the other apprentices noticed. "Aunt Amy looks worried these days," Chisom whispered to Ifunanya during the break. "She does," Ifunanya agreed, but she said no more. She didn't want to share what she had discovered. That evening, Ifunanya decided to visit Mama Nkechi again. She found the old woman sitting outside her small hut, shelling groundnuts. "Mama Nkechi," Ifunanya said, bowing slightly. The old woman looked up and smiled faintly. "You are back. What is this time, child?" "I need to know about Amy," Ifunanya said. "Please, tell me what happened to her." Mama Nkechi sighed and set down the basket of granules. "You are very stubborn, aren't you?" she said. "Very well. I will tell you what I know, but you must promise to be careful." "I promise," Ifunanya said eagerly. Mama Nkechi began her story. Many years ago, Amy was just like any other young woman in the village. She was beautiful and ambitious, but her family was poor. She dreamt of becoming a famous fashion designer, but she had no money to start her business. One day, she heard about a shrine deep in the forest where people could go to ask for help. The spirit of the shrine was said to grant wishes, but it always demanded something in return. Emme was desperate, and she went to the shrine. She made a deal with the spirit. It would give her extraordinary beauty and unmatched talent, but in exchange, she had to give up her true reflection. She didn't understand what she meant at that time, but she agreed. From that day on, her beauty became otherworldly, and her design were unlike anything anyone had seen. She became famous just as she had dreamed, but there was a catch. What catch? If Naya asked, leaning forward. She could never look at her reflection again, Mama Nkechi said, and she had to feed the spirit with her creations. Every night she goes to that mirror to offer it the best of her design. If she stopped, the spirit would take everything from her, including her life. If Naya's heart pounded as she listened. "So that's why she never looks at mirror," she said. "Yes," Mama Nkechi nodded. "And that's why her talent seems to be magical. But it's not hers alone, it comes from the spirit." "Is there a way to break this deal?" If Naya asked. Mama Nkechi's expression darkened. "The spirit is not easily defeated. It's a powerful and cunning one. If Eme wants to be free, she must find the courage to face it. But that is not an easy thing to do." If Naya returned to the workshop with a heavy heart. She now understood why Amy was so secretive and why she seemed so troubled. But she also felt sorry for her. Amy had made a terrible mistake, and now she was trapped. That night, if Naya stayed back at the workshop again, she couldn't resist the urge to look at the forbidden room one more time. She wanted to see the mirror for herself and understand the spirit that controlled Amy. This time, she brought a small lantern with her. She pushed the door open cautiously and stepped inside. The room was held as ever. The glowing mirror dominated the space. Its surface rippled like water. Ifnai took a deep breath and stepped closer. As she looked into the mirror, her reflection disappeared, replaced by a winged shadow. The deep voice spoke again. "You are brave to return, child," it said. "What do you seek?" "I want to know the truth," Ifnai said, her voice trembling. The shadow in the mirror shifted, forming the outline of the face. It was strange and otherworldly, with eyes glowing red. "The truth is not for you," the spirit said. "Leave now, or you will pay the price." "I am not afraid of you," Ifnaya said. though her hands were shaking. The spirit laughed. You should. Your curiosity will be your undoing. Before Ifunanya could respond, the mirror's surface began to ripple violently. A powerful force pulled her closer, as if trying to drag her into the mirror. She struggled against it, her heart racing with fear. Suddenly, Amen burst into the room. Let her go, she shouted. The force stopped, and the mirror surface stilled. Amen grabbed Ifunanya's arm and pulled her out of the room, slamming the door behind them. What were you thinking? Emin demanded, her voice shaking with anger. I've told you to stay away from that room. I had to know the truth, if Naya said, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to help you. Emin's expression softened and she sighed. You don't understand what you are dealing with. The spirit is dangerous, and if you keep mingling, you will end up just like me. Or worse. If Naya's wiped her tears, there has to be a way to free you from it, she said. Amy shook her head. The deal cannot be undone. I made my choice, and now I had to live with it. But you are not happy, if Naya said. Isn't there anything you can do? Amy hesitated, her eyes filled with pain. There might be a way, she admitted, but it's dangerous, and I don't want to be involved. I'm already involved, if Naya said. Please let me help you. Amy looked at her for a long moment and nodded. Very well, but you must promise to do exactly as I say. I promise, if Naya said. As so, the two women began to plan. If Naya didn't know what lay ahead, but she was determined to help Amy break free for the spirit grip, no matter the cost. If Nai couldn't get Mama Nkechi's word out of her mind, her beauty and her talent are not natural. The old man had said. Now, as if Naya walked in the workshop, she began to see Emen sewing in a different light. Emen's hands moved like magic. With every stroke of her needle, she transformed plain fabrics into master designs. Her design seems to flow with an energy that was almost alive. Customers would gasp when they saw her work, the admiration filling the room. Only an only Auntie Amen can do such wonders, Chisom said one afternoon as Amen reviewed a stunning gele design. The headdress sparkled with intricate patterns, the colors blending perfectly. She makes it look easy, if Naya murmured, her eyes fixed on Amen. But as she watched more closely, if Naya noticed something strange, Amen never walked while she smiled. Her face was set in a tense expression, and her hands sometimes trembled as though the beauty she created came as a great cost. Later that day, a wealthy trader arrived to pick up a custom-made gown. The gown was breathtaking. The golden fabric shimmered in the light. This is perfect, the trader exclaimed, running her fingers over the delicate embroidery. Amen, you are a genius. Thank you, Amen said, her voice calm but distant. As the trader handed over payment and left the gown, Amen stood for a moment, staring at the empty space where the gown had been. Then she turned and walked forward the forbidden room, carrying a small burden of fabric. If Naya's heart raced, she had seen Emin do this before, taking leftover fabric into the room. What did she do with it? That evening, when the other apprentices had gone home, if Naya stayed back, she pretended to be cleaning the sewing tables, but her eyes were on Emin. Once again, Emin disappeared into the forbidden room. This time, if Naya crept closer, she could hear Emin's voice, low and urgent, as though she was speaking to someone. Here is my offering, Emin said. This is my best work of the day. Let it be enough. A deep voice replied, each tone filled with menace. You know the rules, Emin. Do not test me. If Naya's hand trembled as she pressed her ears closer to the door, what was Emin offering? And to whom? The next morning, Emin announced a special project to the apprentices. We have been asked to create wedding outfits for the Igwe's daughter, she said. This is a great honor, and I expect nothing less than perfection. The apprentices buzzed with excitement. Designing for royalty was a rare opportunity. As they worked, if Naya couldn't help but marvel at Emin's skills. The designs she stretched were unlike anything if Naya had ever seen. Elegant, bold, and full of life. But as Emin walked on the main bridal gown, if Naya noticed something unusual. Emin's hand shook slightly as she swooned, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. It was as if it's an act of creating such beauty was draining her. Are you alright, ma? If Naya asked cautiously. I am fine, Amen replied sharply, not looking up. Ifnaya didn't believe her, but she said nothing more. When the bridal outfits were complete, Emin called the apprentices together. Bring the fabrics we didn't use, she said. Ifnaya and others gathered the scrap of material and handed them to Emin. She took them into the forbidden room, locking the door behind her. Ifnaya's heart pounded. She remembered what Mama Nkechi had said. Emin had to offer her best creations to the spirit. Was that what she was about to do? That night, Ifunanya couldn't sleep. The memory of Emin's trembling hand and her urgent voice in the forbidden room haunted her. She's suffering, Ifunanya whispered to herself. There must be a way to help her. The next day, Ifunanya decided to watch Emin more closely. She noticed how Emin's mood darkened whenever she completed a beautiful piece. She saw how Emin's hand lingered on her creation as if reluctant to let them go. And she saw something else, Emin's reflection. As Emin passed by a glass cabinet, Ifnaya noticed that her reflection didn't match her movement. It was faint and distorted, like a shadow struggling to keep up. Ifnaya's breath caught up in her throat. The spirit has taken Emin's real reflection, just as Mama Nkechi has said. Ifnaya knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. That evening, after the other apprentices had left, she approached Emin. Auntie Emin, she said, her spirit trembling. I know about the spirit. She froze her back to Ifnaya. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and anger. What do you know? She asked quietly. I know you made a deal, Ifnaya said. I know you give the spirit your best work, and I know it's destroying you. Emma's hand clenched into fist. You have been spying on me? She said, her voice shaking. I only want to help, Ifnaya said. Please, ma, let me help you. Emma laughed bitterly. Help me? You don't understand what you are saying. The spirit doesn't let go of its bargain. If you interfere, it will destroy you too. But there has to be a way to break the deal, if Naya insisted. There is no way, Emin said, her voice filled with despair. I made my choice, and now I have to live with it. If Naya refused to give up, she spent the next few days observing Emin even more closely, looking for clues that might help her. She paid attention to every stitch Emma made, every fabric she chose, and every time she disappeared into the forbidden room. And slowly, she began to see a pattern. Emma's most beautiful designs, the ones that brought her the most praise, seems to weaken her the most. The spirit feeds on her talent, if Naya realized. The more beauty she creates, the more it takes from her. If Naya knew she had to act quickly, Emma was losing herself piece by piece with every masterpiece she created. If Nai couldn't bear to see Emin suffer any longer, she had uncovered enough to know that spirit's hold over Emin was tied to the beauty of her creation. But how could she break the cycle? Late one night, as Emin locked up the workshop, Ifnaya approached her. Auntie Emin, she said firmly, we have to face the spirit together. Emin turned sharply. No, she said. You don't understand. It's too dangerous. I understand more than you think, Ifnaya said. I know it feeds on your talent. I know you have been giving it pieces of yourself every time you create something beautiful. But you don't have to live like this anymore. Tears filled Emin's eyes. You don't know what you are saying, she whispered. I know it will be hard, Ifnaya said, but you can't let the spirit control you forever. You are stronger than this. Emma hesitated, her fear battling with the faint spark of hope. Finally, she nodded. All right, she said, we will do it together. That night, Emma and Ifnaya entered the forbidden room. The air was thick with an unnatural energy, and the glowing mirror seemed to pulse with life. The spirit voice echoed from the mirror as soon as they stepped inside. You dare to challenge me, Amen? It said, each stone dripping with malice. Amen's hand trembled, but Ifnaya stepped forward. She is not alone, she said boldly. Your time is over. The spirit laughed. You think you can defy me, little girl? I hold Amen's soul. She belongs to me. She doesn't belong to you, Ifunaya shouted. You only have power because she gave it to you. She's taking it back. Emin took a deep breath and stepped forward. I made a mistake, she said, her voice steady despite the fear. But I won't let you control me any longer. The spirit roared and the mirror surface rippled violently. Shadows widowed around the room and a powerful force pushed against them. Then pay the price, the spirit thundered. If Naya grabbed Emin's hand, don't be afraid, she said. We can do this. Emen nodded, drawing strength from Ifunaya's courage. She stepped closer to the mirror and placed her hands on its surface. I take my reflection back, Emen said. I take back my talent. You have no power over me. The spirit screamed in rage. The shadows in the mirror wriggled and twisted, but they couldn't pull Emen in. You think you can escape me? The spirit hissed. You will regret this. No, I won't, Emen said. I am done with you. With one final surge of energy, the mirror shattered, its shards scattering around the room. The shadows disappeared and the oppressive energy lifted. Emen and Ifunanya stood in silence, staring at the broken mirror. For the first time in years, Emen felt free. Tears streamed down her eyes as she turned to Ifunanya. Thank you, she whispered. You are free now, Ifunanya said, smiling through her own tears. In the weeks that followed, Emen's life began to change. Her beauty was no longer otherworldly, but she was still strikingly in her natural elegance. Her talent didn't disappear, but it became something new, less magical, but now more personal. Emen worked harder than ever to create beautiful designs, not for the spirit, but for herself and her customers. Her joy and passion returned, and her workshop flourished like never before. If Naya stayed by her side, becoming more than just an apprentice, she became a true friend and partner, someone Emin could trust and rely. And though Emin could always carry the memory of her mistake, she knew she had found something more valuable than beauty and fame, freedom, truth, and the strength to herself. After then, Emin began to advise young girls and anyone who cares to listen that there is no shortcut to success. Work hard and everything will fall in place. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this.